Good morning. It is Tuesday. Time for the Monday game recap. If you watched the predictions yesterday, I don't think I was too far off this week. They met with the three fire giants along with the frost giant. There was a bit of talk. Not everything that I thought might come out came out. There were a few questions that weren't asked. There were a few questions that were abandoned whenever the frost giant made comments. They eventually did provoke the frost giant into anger. Basically, they convinced the fire giant, Ferris, to stay with them rather than leaving with the frost giant, Godric. Basically, what the dynamic here was, Ferris was a blacksmith, and a quite good blacksmith, but he wasn't much of a fighter. And he had gone on this journey because of his grandfather's ring, because he felt someone was summoning his grandfather, and it was his responsibility to give them the regretful news that his grandfather's gone and he has the ring now. And because he is going to Osterna, to the legendary home of the giants, he's taking his children with him because he's not going to leave them behind for this. But, as I said previously, he's not a warrior. He's not a fighter. Along the way, they encountered Godric, the frost giant, who is obviously a fighter, a warrior. And he told Godric that he was going to Osterna. Godric, of course, laughed at him, because no one goes to Osterna. It's missing, it's gone, it's no longer there. But Ferris convinced him that the ring would lead him to Osterna. And in this, Godric saw opportunity. He knows the legends of the Uncrowned King. He knows the legends of Osterna. He knows the legends of the Throne of the Bones of the World. He's aware of all of these things. And even though he's kind of halfway believed, yeah, right, whatever, because there was no evidence, now, being presented with someone who says they have evidence, he started to think, is this an opportunity? So he agreed to defend the fire giants in exchange for being taken to Osterna with them. Now, they realized very early on that Godric was not a decent person. But they also realized that they had made a deal with him and that he would not take dissolving that deal kindly. So they traveled with him. And that was the situation when Tywin flagged them down. So yeah, I say they pissed off Godric. Vorian pissed off Godric. I could have predicted that, I just didn't call out names on it. But also, as I thought probably would end up happening, the fight didn't last long. It was considerably shorter than even I predicted it would have been. Mainly because I had forgotten that Vorian has a spell which basically would normally do 12d10 damage, which is, respectable. But he can pump it up to doing 20 die 10 damage by knocking it up to like an 8th or 9th level spell, because he is able to cast those. He is an epic caster at this point, so yeah, 20 die 10, still, you know, impressive, but then the actual spell that he'd chosen I'd forgotten was one of the Spelljammer bombardment spells, meaning that it's a spell that has a particular premise to it that if it is cast outside of an atmosphere, it basically then does times 10 damage. What the spell basically does is it takes an asteroid and it drops it on your target. Usually in space, it's used as a bombardment weapon. But there's nothing to say that you can't just target a creature with it. So he targeted the dragon, that was the giant's chariot, with 20 die 100 damage. And turned this dragon into a cloud of blood in one attack. Now, yes, it definitely looks impressive. Is it situational? Well, yeah. It basically just means, though, that if anyone's going to attack them on the ship, they have problems. Because on a planet, it would not have had that kind of a devastating effect. The giant, floating in space now, decides that discretion is the better part of valor, vows vengeance, and then activates a basically escape item that he had, which plane shifts him to the elemental plane of ice. And then they continued on. They decided that they wanted to plane shift to Osterna after all. There was a lot of debate on whether or not they could plane shift to Osterna after all. Vorian finally decided screw it and plane shifted. Plane shifted back a few minutes later and says, look, I've done it, I've been there, let's go. So they arranged for both of the Spelljammers, both of the ships, to be docked at Malhavoc. For safety for the crews. And then they plane shift to Osterna. And upon arrival, they then use Vorian's aesthetic, as I thought they would, as a ship within the system. As I said before, his creature can become a ship, which they can journey on, but his ship cannot travel through the void between worlds. It cannot travel through the flow. It is basically purely an in-system ship. If you want to think in Star Trek terms, it does not have a warp drive. It's still a big ship, comfortable, room for all of them, all of that, just no warp drive. So they get to Osterna. They spent a good bit of time then debating where in Osterna they actually wanted to go. They were advised by Ferris that from the legends that he's heard, i.e. stories his grandfather told him, the deeper into the system you go, without the protection of one of the trials, the more dangerous it will become. So they decide, starting out, we'll just go to the Hill Giant planet, the outermost planet, and have a look around. They arrived, decided to sit down in one of the smaller villages, and found that everything was covered in ice. 8, 9, 10 inches thick, crystal clear ice. And when I say everything, I mean the ground, the trees, the inhabitants, looks like the entire world has been flash frozen. Yeah, so they spent a good bit of time trying to figure out what the ice was. Found out that it is magical. It is some kind of a magical effect. It is very powerful. And then finally they headed into the big city on the Hill Giants world. Found it exactly the same way as they had the village. And made their way to what they believe is the Temple of the Trial, as pointed out by Ferris. And there on the steps of the temple, we finished the game for the evening. We did have a couple kind of discussion points at the very end, where Val the Merid, the new fish genie guy, decided to attempt to discover the location of the frost giant that they had encountered in Malhavik. They discovered that he was back in Malhavik. And there was also some discussion that Val wanted to leave the group for a little while and go look around the rest of the city while they were in the trial. No firm decision was made on that yet. Like I said, we left them at the steps of the trial, so we'll see what happens next week. Anyway, that's going to be it for today. I'll be back tomorrow with a discussion topic. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Check the links at the bottom. I'll make sure that I put my campaign diary and my all my links in the links. Go figure. Have a great day, everybody. See you tomorrow.